Yeah, live. It is 9:59. Nice. Almost right at 10 o'clock. Hopefully everybody's doing good. I want to talk today about a buildup that I did long ago, and it was a 331 small block Ford. And I even titled this because I did a magazine story with it, and we've done some. It's appeared in a few of the videos also, but I titled it Planning Ahead. And the reason that I did that is I wanted to demonstrate to people that when you're building something and putting it together, you should take the steps in thinking about stuff that's happening in the future. Now, we've talked about that on the LS stuff when we do, even if it's a junkyard motor, if you're putting it together and you're going to put a turbo on it later on, then you want to do things like my promoting my store, richardholderperformance.com. If you're going to get something and you're eventually going to put a turbo on it, you got a junkyard motor, then you want to get things like I would choose a smaller cam. Like I would pick a low buck truck camshaft. I would get bigger injectors for it. I wouldn't get injectors that are just big enough for what you're doing NA, because when you put a cam like that in there and you gain 60 horsepower, you need bigger injectors in it. Because the stock injectors, I mean, it's it's a half empty, half full kind of thing. Yes, you have to spend the money on bigger injectors, and I hate telling people that. Yeah, you got to spend more money on it, but the good thing is that the camshaft made like an extra 60 horsepower, so the extra power is what's forcing you to have the fuel flow to support that power level. So that's kind of a good thing too. But it's the same thing with this Ford. So if we look at this Ford, what I did, like I said, called it planning ahead, because we were going to run boost later on. We knew that in almost all of the motors that I put together are eventually going to get that. A lot of times immediately, but sometimes, just off in the future somewhere, we know if I put together an NA motor, very rarely, with the exception of the Engine Masters Challenge motor that I did, very rarely is the motor going to go together and just have it be like an all motor kind of thing. Sometimes we've run these motors and only ever run them NA, but 90% of the time, if I have a test motor, it's going to get some kind of boost. It's going to get a supercharger on there, one of the variety of different blowers, Vortec or Paxton or ProCharger, Torque Storm, a Roots blower, is the 671 or a Whipple or a Kenny Bell or whatever. It's going to get some kind of blower on it. It's going to get a turbo on it. It's going to get something on it. It's going to get nitrous. Even if way back in the day when we were doing a lot of this testing, like for the nitrous setup, and I'm finishing up the nitrous video today about what's it worth. What is nitrous worth? And I got some cool stuff. So we got the Big Bang one. We got a carbureted 5.3. We got a turbo one. So we got lots of cool nitrous-y stuff, including nitrous with boost, which is good. But what you want to do is when you're putting these motors together, you want to plan for what's going to happen in the future. So that's what we did on this. First of all, I did, rather than just, if you're going to build a motor like on a 5-liter, rather than just put together another 5-liter, which is certainly an option, you could do forged internals, forged crank, forged rods, forged pistons, and then put that in a stock block. And then you could put that together, and the forged internals obviously would help you they'd have the strength to make more power. Now, and depending on which year 5-liter you had, you could have had forged pistons in it already, but not forged rods. And so you could put forged rods in it, put an H-beam and I-beam, depending on your power level. Quite honestly, I don't think that's really a consideration with somebody that has a stock block, because that's probably going to be your limitation more so than the forged internals are. We did on this one, we did a forged crank. So we did a 3250 stroke crank, I believe. And then a pretty typical for a small block Ford. We did a 5.4. This was an H-beam rod, and we did a forged piston. I think that these were probes way back in the day that we probably put in there. It had valve reliefs, and in this case, it had valve reliefs for the twisted wedge heads that we put on. And we put full CNC ported twisted wedge heads on it, which were a good cylinder heads. Naturally, I put the Extreme Energy 274 camshaft in there. And then I topped it off with, which was relatively new at the time, was there, and this will be for one of the viewers, we put the Box R intake manifold on it. So we wanted to test what is essentially a shorter runner intake manifold, because back in the 5-liter days, we had a lot of these manifolds. We had the Downs Ford ones, and we had the Hartmans and the Cartec, and we had a bunch of different boxes that you basically just were upper portions that go onto the factory low, either a factory lower or a GT40 lower. They probably had some for the truck lower, the Celine lower, the Holly lower. But basically, what it is you shorten the runner length, and we had lots of plenum volume because it adds power. This is a turbo manifold, or this is a blower manifold or whatever, and it's just a short runner manifold. We know what those do. If you guys watch this channel at all, you know what short runners do and what long runners do, and they do the same thing NA, and they do it under boost. But we wanted to try this, and this one was a little better because at least it had runners kind of going up into the common plenum. They weren't just an opening basically on a flange. And so that one actually turned out to work out pretty good. In fact, when I did a comparison of that box R versus the TFS R intake manifold, the kind of longer runner intake manifold, the box R was a better combination. And I like that. So that worked out well. And also the box R could accept a big throttle body. You could normally we would go, 65, 70, 75 on the small block Ford stuff. This one would take a 90. And while back in the day, we thought a 90, that's gigantic. That's like a race only thing. Now they come factory, a lot of the LS stuff. So it's not as gigantic as we thought it was back in the day. It is, you can talk about the drivability of that big a throttle body, particularly when you're doing blower stuff. But I mean, let's face it, it's all, stock stuff is gigantic anymore. So, but we ran this I tested it with a variety of different throttle bodies. We tested it with a 75, we tested with a 90. It naturally liked the 90 best and made the most power with it. We also tested this on a 408 stroker, and that's where we did the 90 millimeter throttle body, where it liked that better. And so it made more power. We did roller rockers on it. These were comps, and we had let's see, we did have forged rods, forged pistons, and forged crank in this. And then I put 36-pound injectors in this because, again, back in the day, a 36-pound injector is pretty big. You can support a lot of power with that. Not what we're talking about. Not what we're talking about today. Not boosted power. So we ran this thing NA, and it did well. I think it made in the low to mid 400 horsepower NA. But there are things that I would do differently now, particularly if I knew exactly, like I was building the motor for thinking later on for a Vortex supercharger. Then the way that it got put together would probably be the way that I would do it. Because with a Vortex supercharger or a centrifugal supercharger, let's say, or even most superchargers, what I like to do is have the motor make more NA power. That's what we did by putting ported heads on it and putting that style of intake manifold on it, particularly that intake manifold with a slightly shorter runner than we would normally use, depending on where you wanted to rev this thing. But the box R would allow you to rev this motor beyond 6,000 RPM, up to 7,000 RPM even. And as we know, if you have a centrifugal blower like a Vortex, ATIs, whatever, as we go up in engine speed, we go up in blower speed, we go up in boost, we make more power. So this thing would continue to rock and roll at higher engine speeds and make lots of power. And then you'd have an RPM range where you could run this thing and, it would storm pretty hard, let's say, on the big end. But, and that was the goal, is we were thinking more supercharging. Eventually I did run this thing with a turbo also. And it got me thinking lately that, in the discussions that we've had with the LS stuff, when we're talking about, hey, if you're going to put a turbo on it, you don't need, fancy ported heads and intake manifolds, or depending on your power level. And I didn't think about that when I was doing that particular buildup. My train of thought was, let's have it make more NA power. That's why I went bigger on the displacement. That's why I went with a full CNC ported heads. That and that they gave them to me, which was, how do you say, well, if we're going to give you whatever you want, so let's, you pick the ported heads. But if you were having to buy them and you were doing this for a turbo application, then I probably would have picked the regular twisted wedge heads. Just, they flowed enough to they flowed enough to support the power level that we eventually made. Because quite honestly, that Extreme Energy 274 cam in a stroker motor like that is not going to make 500 horsepower, not NA. So it's not a big enough cam to do that. It's a good cam for this kind of power range and this kind of displacement range, but it wouldn't be what I would choose if I was trying to make lots of even more NA power. Like I'd put that comp 236, 248 cam in, the XFI camshaft, or even there's lots of other good camshafts out there that have the kind of specs that I would want to run for an NA combination like that. But if I was doing a turbo, what I would do differently on that particular motor is I'd probably still do the forged internals. But honestly, if I wanted to do it and I was paying for everything, I wouldn't put a forged crank in it. I'd never broken a cast crank, so I wouldn't put a forged crank in it. If I was doing a stroker motor and I was getting a stroker combination and they had a cast crank, I just get a cast crank. I would get forged rods and forged pistons because quite honestly, they're not that much more than a stock piston. And also I needed a piston upgrade anyways to work with the twisted wedge head because I know, excuse me, wanted to have enough piston valve clearance. So I would get rods and pistons and put them in there. I'd get a cast crank. I'd use the stock block. I would probably put as cast twisted wedge heads on there. I definitely would replace the heads. I wouldn't use the stock heads. You could go to the wrecking yard and get GT40 heads, but they're still iron. And I think an aluminum head is a way better way to go, particularly if you're running boost. They give you an edge on, on detonation. Definitely, I would go with bigger injectors. 36s are just ridiculous. Even though back in the day, we thought, oh, 36s, those are big. The 19s, the 24s, the 30s, and the 36s were the big ones, or the 42s were the big ones. Look, just put 80s in it or 100s or whatever so that you have enough fuel. And back in the day when I was doing it, we were doing it with a meter that was calibrated for injectors. Now on the dyno, we didn't do that. But in the car, that's the way that we were running it. And so we were doing it that way and getting a meter calibration for, 80-pound injectors, just would have been inconceivable back then. But we would definitely put bigger injectors in it. I think with a turbo, I don't think I would run that box R intake manifold unless I decided that I wanted the turbo boost and RPM. But I don't think I would do that because I think the nice thing with a turbo is that we don't have to run a lot of RPM. So I think I would put a long runner intake manifold on it, not a twisted wedge R. I would go with a street burner or street max or whatever their long runners are, or even like a Holley Systemax, or either a Holley Systemax probably, or an RPM2 Edelbrock, which were both good intake manifolds for that back in the day. And you could run to 6,000 or 6,500 with those. And the nice thing about the turbo is that, whatever turbo size we wanted, we could run we could run that power level. So if we wanted to make 1,000 horsepower, which is probably not going to be a good idea on a stock small block Ford block, but we could do that. And I probably would put something smaller in there. So, something that was trimmed for 700 or 800 horsepower would be fine. And because it would also have 700 or 800 foot-pounds of torque, and it would have, it'd just be a monster. So I probably would have done that motor maybe a little bit differently now than back then. And also if it were a turbo as opposed to being a supercharger. Let's see what you guys got going on. We're gonna need a poll. Okay, would you build your small block Ford differently for a Vortex supercharger than a turbo? Would you make it blower specific or turbo specific? And I'm scrolling. YouTube, Surfer Jag, Charlie Brown, what's going on? Scottish is here. DNA's in the house. Greetings, everyone. Stronger block is what I would change. That's a good point. I actually forgot to mention that if I was going to make a lot of power, I would have rather have spent the money on a block than a steel crank. Now, I know that those are not comparable in price, at least, but I would have spent money on a block if I was trying to make a lot of power, particularly if I was going to do any sort of racing in it at that kind of elevated power level. A block upgrade would have been a good idea. So that's a good thing to point out there. Turbo Sentra, Lunchbox. How are we doing? Pistons, rings, head work, good head gaskets. Should be good for boost with the setup depending on boost level. On the small block forward stuff, a lot of guys have run. I remember Todd Garcher when he was around, when he was alive, that he had the CarTech Turbo Mustang, and that car went fast, and it had stock heads on it. But aluminum heads are definitely the way to go. Alrighty then, I'm tempted to put my motor and trans in by myself. Stay safe out there, man. Pick your brain. Richard, how much horsepower percentage would be lost on the 440 big block Chrysler with a non-functioning spark plug wire on one cylinder? 12%. It could be more than that, but only because you're not just down one cylinder when that's not firing. It can, if it's a carbureted one, it can affect the signal to other cylinders as well. But at least 12%. I'm installing a Truck Plus cam on my LQ4. What do you recommend upgrading? Well, hopefully, if you got it from me, which I'm sure you had to, you have to change the springs too. And I don't know, on an LQ4, you're probably going to need fuel injectors as well. I have a hard time since the block weakness being proven as a thing. Why you would ever build a 5-liter stock block when the 351 roller block is there? Same money to build, and it's bigger and stronger. That's a good point. If you didn't have the motor, like I already had the block and stuff because I had a 5-liter Mustang, but if you didn't have a motor to start out with and you were going to the wrecking yard, you should do a 351. Now, a 351 in a Fox Mustang, they had kits for them, but you have to get probably more expensive headers and things, but it's still a better motor. And an aluminum 351 would be great. Then you're just talking about aluminum LS. Got a Holly 75-pound injectors for the project car. If I go with a Terminator, it should be easy to teach it the injector data. Yeah, if you have a Holly Terminator, you don't even have to worry about all that injector data. We never put injector data into other than what the flow rate it is. And on the early Hollies, the flow rate of the injector had no effect on the fueling. You could put in whatever number that you wanted, and it didn't change anything. Now I think it does. But you don't have to put in all of the flow data like you do on a factory ECU on a Holly. Speaking of injectors, are the ones you sell high ohm? Yes, they are. I guess the other guy answered my email about some springs. He said if they are the ones that came with an LS, not any help. I don't know. What is your question about springs? Nitrous plus boost is awesome. 100 horsepower shop makes more than 100 horsepower with boost. It does that if it raises the boost, yeah. This video couldn't have come at a better time. I was debating if I should use my 706 heads and switch to 317s once I get boosted. Now I'm just going to go with 317s. I don't know why you would switch to that. You should just put one set of heads on there, whichever ones you put on there, and just leave them on there. The 706 heads will make more than the 317s do. The only reason that I would put 317 heads on if it's a 5.3 is if you're trying to run a lot of boost but doing it on pump gas. Does an air to water block under a roots blower add plenum length? Plenum is not a length thing, really. It's a volume thing if you're talking about plenum. Got the sensor running good now. OT sensor was bad. It was reading 1.2. Changes to reading 0.6. Okay, that's a big difference. Makes your computer want to adjust and do funny things. Does it rev now, Turbo Sentra? Oh, there you go, Tim. Small block forward and box R. New. Everybody say hi to the Brewsty 30. I love your videos. I'm a first-time builder. Settled on a 418. Is it a LS motor? I'm assuming an LS3 base motor. As class, you wouldn't clean them up a bit. Not on a turbo 5-liter. I wouldn't. If your question is about the trick flow heads, I wouldn't do anything to them. Hawaiian Stealth. You're wanting to run a carbureted intake manifold? That's exactly what I'm doing. Stock crank with forged rods and pistons and ported 317 heads and LS2 style intake manifold with a 90 millimeter throttle body. Hopefully it's solid. Are you doing a turbo then on it later on or something? Fuel map was 250 in boost. Now it's 150. Slightly rich, yeah. If it's on the if your little bubble is in the wrong spot, good things are not going to happen. RW, good morning. I would LS swap it for boost. I have a 302 with a 270 cam. Plan on swapping in 172 rockers. Okay. I recall that the box R made more power everywhere over the long run or R, so not sure why you wouldn't leave it going turbo. I wouldn't. I would pick because the box R and the TFS R intake manifold I don't think is a good intake manifold. I've never had it do well. The box R was a little better, but they're not as good as an RPM2 or a Systemax through the power curve where I would be running it. 351 for the win, over 302 definitely, and so much more torque. The turbo, I think I'd pick a smaller cam that built better power down low for response, and then the Vortec, I want more top end. Chris, I don't know what you mean by what are my thoughts. Injector data is only good for voltage changes and light pulse width. It's more critical for what you're doing on the factory ECU. That's cool because I'm used to HP tuners and it's a bit of computer stuff. Yeah, Frank, we don't ever put any of that in there. We just have the air fuel be right for all the things that we're trying to do. And the nice thing is if you're running it in closed loop for all of the part throttle stuff and drivability stuff, you just put in a commanded air fuel and it will keep changing it until it gets there. He's asking about using some beehive springs on a small block Chevy, the blue springs. Well, you can put a beehive spring on anything on a small block Chevy, as long as you have the right installed height and coil bind clearance and retainer to seal clearance. And you're also locating the spring properly with the proper spring cup. What's your favorite cam for a mild street boosted 331? Yeah, that's what I had in my 5-liter Mustang with a Vortec on it that I drove around every day. And mine was even low compression. I will admit that there are probably better, there are better cams than that. That's not the best cam ever made. But it was the right combination for what I was doing, because I was doing a lot of racing with that car. I did a lot of Silver State stuff. I mean, we did it for 12 years. I did a lot of track events with that. We did some drag racing, and so it was more of a performance thing, and I didn't mind what the thing that we didn't mind it being softer, let's say down low. But what it needed, really, I loved the Vortec Mustang. What it needed was a turbo, though. Only reason I was planning using the 317s was because everyone said it's better for boosted setup. Yeah, planning getting the GT45 that you recommended. 317s are not better for a boosted setup. Only thing that they will do is lower the compression. So if you have lower compression and you're trying to run on 91, it can give you a bigger tuning window, but it is going to lose power and it's going to lose response. It goes very fast now and has 10 PSI boost from 2,500 to 7,000. Hard to drive with instant boost. Yeah, but it's got to be fun. It's got to feel really sporty, right? Does it feel a lot different than the turbo? Richard, do you have any favorable impressions of online courses or schools for learning EFI tuning? Yeah, the HP Tuning Academy is a good one. I already signed up for one, but I thought I'd ask. Yeah, the HP Tuning Academy is good. Richard, how do you know if your wastegate is too big? Your wastegate can't be too big. I mean, I guess you could make it, like you could make it gigantic, and then when it opens up, it bleeds all the boost out. But I haven't ever seen that. The turbo sensor of the motor is completely different. HPA had a sale. It's back to regular price at the moment. Okay, yeah, they do good stuff there, and lots of guys I know have gone there. So you'd go with 706s on an E85. If you're running E85, I would definitely go with 706s. You're going to make way more power at every given boost level. Plan on daily driving the truck. That's why I go. And also, you're going to have a lot better boost response. I mean, it's like 20 or 25 better than 317 heads, just NA. And so under boost, that gets multiplied. And if you have a stock piston in a 5.3, you already have like reasonably low compression. I wouldn't want the compression in the 8s. It's like 9.5 or 9.2 or 9.3 or something like that. So that's fine. And on E85, it works great. So I definitely would want the more response stuff would be better. And that's what you get with the 706 head. And there's no, I know that guys want to, like the 317 guys want to tell you that oh, the heads flow more and they make more power. No, they don't. that doesn't happen. So you don't have to worry about that. You can, and if you're putting a GT45 turbo on there, any cylinder head that you put on there you could max that turbo up. Considering valve temp is related to load time, how do you determine if you want to run Inconel exhaust valves versus stainless? I think I would definitely do it for Bonneville and for road racing. I don't think I would worry about that for drag racing. I just don't think it's temperature loaded enough during you could pick your time, 10-second, 9-second, 8-second run, whatever you're doing. Can anyone recommend some cheap springs or retainer setup for TBI heads? I want cheapest setup. I'm ditching the whole heads ASAP for AFRs or skip whites. It shouldn't be too hard to measure that stuff up and find a spring for it. Find out what the OD is. Find out what the necessary ID is. Find out what spring cup goes with that and what the idea of the spring cup is. It fits over your guide. You know, it's just a few measurements. With the price of the GT45 Mango twins, that's 1,500 horsepower with a turbo, so you got to have a lot of motor for that. My next goal is to make a Volvo electric power steering to work with the project. Okay, that'd be cool. Frank, do you know or does anybody know what the load is for the electric power steering? Like, how much juice does that thing require? Do the lights go dim every time you're trying to make a turn? I would just think that electric power steering would take a lot of juice. Tim, put what in the Fox? It's a lot. You need thick wires to burst into flames. Yeah, that's not good. I think the guy's trying to run speaker wire to their big electric fuel pumps. Dude, that poor speaker wire is going just glowing red hot. Put the Volvo power steering in a Fox? Why do I need that? What's your take on using a cam with a wider LSA for a turbo build? Why do you want to do that? What do you think that the LSA does to a turbo? The boost with the turbo was slow and hard to keep consistent. The supercharger is instant and easy control, but the inlet air temperature is 170. It's 40 outside. I need an intercooler. How much boost is it running, Centra? What is the pressure with the? Is it 10 pounds? Did you say? What would you say is a good rear gear to have? What are you trying to do with it, Charlie? Just trying to confirm my reasons for paying $78 a valve on the G10. Thank goodness there are only 3 exhaust valves. Well, are you running that at Bonneville or anything, or is it just driving around? And I don't think I would do that on a street driver thing. You're just doing a daily. Well, I would pick a different gear for a Turbo 400 or a 6L80. I don't know how much freeway driving you're doing. I need the power steering because my pump interferes with the intake and is annoying to repair. I don't know if I'd do it to a Fox if it works already. My power steering works fine in the Fox. But I know guys for drag racing have gone to manual racks on those because they had those in the didn't they have weren't the manual racks in the four-cylinder cars? It's been a long time since we looked at that stuff. But I don't think I would put a manual rack in it either. The power steering's nice. And as long as somebody like Holly has kits to use as long as we could put the power steering and hook it up to the lines and run put an LS in it would be nice because that's what we want to do. Drift kids run the Volvo stuff. Okay. I live in Texas, so there's a lot of highway driving. Well, see, if you had the overdrive like a 4L80, then you could go with 4 series gears. But I don't know if I'd want to drive around with 4 series gears with a 1-to-1, third gear in a turbo 400. I had that kind of gearing in a Mustang, and driving on the freeway it's not cool. 10 psi now. I want 18. Need a different bypass valve spring. I'm dumping the extra boost atmosphere. So is the bypass valve open now, or is it not open now? And you're only going to open it when you turn the boost up? Full electric power steering pump requires an 80 amp fuse. Okay. That's getting serious. That's a lot of juice. 1.5 mile circuit road race, 25 pounds. Yeah, 25 laps. I definitely would have it for that. Are you doing it in a sprint or a metro? That's kind of cool. Does it have coilovers and everything on it? Big C, some people say a turbo cam works best. I say BS because they all are soft down low. The question about the LSA is people look at one thing when they're talking about camshafts. Oh, I need a wider LSA or I need a tighter LSA. You're myopic in what you're looking at. What I look at is what the cam does NA. If you have a camshaft that makes more power NA down low, it's also going to have more boost response. So that's what I would look at. I wouldn't look at the wider LSA as the cure or the definition of making it a turbo cam. I think some of them are, but as we've shown, like the low buck truck camshaft that I have, it's a 107, but it's a great turbo cam. In fact, I recommend it way more than I would most of the turbo cams. It would be a better cam than 90% of the turbo cams out there because it has much better boost response. And for maybe not for a drag race application where they're running lots of RPM, but for a guy driving it around town and wanting boost response, it's going to have way more of that. And then you could just run the power level that you want at whatever boost you want. I have 2 ECUs I can use for my LS3, the C6 Corvette, and a Holly HP ECU. Well, what are you trying to get done? Is it a stock motor or a mildly modified motor where the factory ECU is going to work just fine? Or because if it's that kind of motor, then there's going to be no benefit from an aftermarket standalone deal. Is the general public still building a decent amount of small block Fords, or is the hobby and sport dwindling down for those engines? Which I did mine years ago. Yeah, the 5-liter Mustang stuff is still big. Can lockup be added to any transmission? It's not in the transmission. That's in the converter. That's one thing that has me leaning towards a Turbo 400, so I can add lockup. Assuming, yeah, the Turbo 400 doesn't have lockup. The converter that you get will have a lockup. It's open at 2,500. It was 25 PSI at 2,500. Wow. I'm agreeing with you. I'm just saying that most turbo cams are drag race specs and not good for street. I agree. I think even the smallest ones, even a stage 1 turbo cam, like for a 4.8, I think it's too big of a cam for most 4.8s. Do you have any good information from TrickFlow on the 227 small block forward head? I don't. Is that something new that they just started offering? Teen coilovers, urethane bushings, upgrade anti-roll bars. We just under 1,800 pounds with the cage. It's a convertible Swift. That's interesting. You get to drive with the. Is the cage? Do you have the top up or down, and is the cage like just over you with open? Because then you get to enjoy the breeze. Is it a specific class, or is it just open track days, or what is it? All of that's good because anytime you're out on the track, that's awesome. You get to like rage around in your little turbo Swift with turbo-y goodness and Swifty goodness. That would make you a Swifty, right? I don't know what that is. I don't know. How's our poll doing? 50 cent. Would you build your small block Ford differently for a Vortex supercharger than a turbo? 57% saying no, 43% saying yes. We're split. Not quite in the middle, but mostly in the middle. Or mostly. So, does anybody know how much faster the new hybrid Corvette's going to be than the already super pissed off 1,000+ horsepower version? I would think that the acceleration rate would be dramatically improved. Obviously, the top speed's not going to be improved, I don't think, unless you can activate the electric motor like at the top speed. I'm about to build my first small block Ford engine. I just traded my extra engine for my square body 462 big block for 37 Ford pickup with a 351 in it. Cool. Yeah, the new Corvette is crazy fast. And I don't think we've seen actually how fast that car will go until somebody puts gearing in it. Went to buy a stock 0411 computer, and the guy gave me a TCM with it, so I'm assuming that's for a 4L80. He said it came from a 2002 Suburban Denali, but my knowledge is still very limited. Yeah, on the factory, does anybody know on the factory stuff? The factory computer doesn't have the transmission control in it, right? Is that a separate thing? That thing's an animal, not a vet guy, but that thing is wow. Yeah, it's 1,064 or something, I think is the 63 or 64. It's a lot. It's impressive. I think they went 950s at 150, which means, and they did that on Michelin Sport Cups on an unprepped track. So you know that there's a lot more there. Yeah, somebody's easily going to go H with that thing. I'm sure. I wonder when guys are going to be out there doing that. I mean, if you just put drag radials on it and had a prep track, that thing's going to go 8s, particularly when they start being able to control the boost with these things and start turning the turbos up. Top can be up or down, and I run in a midget class sub 1,000 cc's. I do go out on a lot of Miata days, but do the change in line with front wheel drive versus rear wheel drive. I don't go out on really busy days. The 0411 ECU won't work with pre-97 solenoids in the transmission. So there's an update for you. See, that's why we come here, for transmission information. I like going back and looking at because I'm doing the video on the nitrous with turbos and stuff. It's you forget about some of that stuff. You're like, oh yeah, that's like really cool. Look at all that power. That's awesome. I can't believe I did that silliness. It's a separate component. Okay. Transmission control module. You have to run a later trans if you want an overdrive. But when did they introduce the 4L80? How can I take my anger out of my Turbo 400? You can do a bunch of neutral drops in it. That's always fun. That's always good for transmissions. Wow. Oh, that's so bad for stuff. Used to be that sort of thing was only reserved for rental cars and J turns. Craziness. Pearl 80, 2004, 2005. Okay. Pearl 80 was in the 90s. Wow. So did the Gen 6 454s come back with 4L80s? Or were they only Turbo 400s? That's the, by then, by 2000, they should have been 4L80s, right? I could never do that type of thing in others' cars. Streaming live. We're live. Live from RichardHolderPerformance.com headquarters. I need to put banners up right here, right? So in fact, we're going to close our poll and we'll just end our thing with that poll. Okay, should I put banners in the background of the live feed? I'm thinking that I should. I just kind of want to change stuff around a little bit. Maybe do a different desk or something. You know, just something. Just mix it up a little bit. I would think the 80, but not sure because the 454 is down on stock power. What was it rated? The horsepower was 290 in the 454. Dennis, you're a no on the banners. Looks like most of the people are yeses, although about 3/4. You you like The Office? Yeah. We want to start doing interviews too. Run it like it is. So I can look trophies. Look. Okay, over here. There we go. Snacks. Radius entries. Cool stuff. It's time for me to change the Camaro book, though. We gotta highlight something else. The class I run is pretty unique. No motorcycle engine powered cars, sub 1,000 cc's. Ends up being a lot of Kai cars from Japan. That's cool. I like those cars, though. Did BTR figure out the air to water intercooler for his intake? I think that they're changing the design of the intakes. Maybe. I'll have to check with them and see. I have the Summit Big Nasty Cam. Nice. And my 6-liter. When you're saying around 550, is that the lift on the camshaft? I have a 4L60. That's what fits in my Nissan. What torque converter would you use for the street? 25 to 2800 probably. Can't wait to see the dyno graph. Are you taking it to the chassis dyno? I definitely want to see that. Make sure you share that with us. And then Turbo Sentra, send me a good engine photo. We'll use that for one of the live feed discussions. I'll use that for one of the thumbnails. That's pretty cool. Pearl 80 was the predecessor for the Well, then that would make the Turbo 400 the predecessor for the 4L80, right? And it was in 91 that they offered that? Cool. 91, 91. Chrome wheel fuel injected 91. I've always liked those Gen 6 454s. Still do. I'll need to clean it up a bit. No, we don't want it clean. You look who you're talking to. You know how we do it. I'm all junkyard. All junkyard all the time. You don't have no idea how many times I've been yelled at by the guys at West Tech. Really, Richard? This? No, you can't. Just that when that motor's just running by itself, it's just dropping all kinds of stuff all over. I know that's just stuff that's falling off. It's extra. It is much nicer. I can't believe how much nicer the motors look when they have a hot seat there. When you take and clean them off, man, like the aluminum motors, they all just look so good. Hey, look, it's brand new. It's all rebuilt now. It's a fresh rebuild race motor now. They do look a lot better, and it is nicer to work on them when it's not all. And who knows what's on a lot of those motors. Nothing better, clean engine bay. Yeah, the engine bay is nice if that's clean. But even just the motor when we run on the dyno, my middle name is Oil Down. Yeah, just leaking oil all over everything. Yeah, the hot seats are cool. I think that one runs on kerosene, and so having it hot and steam cleany, very nice. You're running a 4L80. You go with the mid 90s models. They're a bit better off than the early ones. What's the difference in them, Katie? What did they change? Do they have the Corvette servo in them? I got one of those. My 4L60 race transmission. You can run them on kerosene or diesel. Yeah. It's good stuff. It is amazing how nice the engines look, though. I mean, it looks you go from it being a junkyard motor to it, and then now it looks like a crate motor. I mean, they're really nice. Although I have to say the aluminum blocks, like that L33 and the LC9, I think, or an L86 that I have, the aluminum blocks a lot of times get stained, and that even the hot seat doesn't take the stains out of it. You have to use probably the oven cleaner to get that stuff off. Would you choose a 331 over a 347 for a boosted street car? It depends. I don't know which one of those I would pick if I was running a Vortec. I would almost lean toward the 347 with that. If it was a turbo, I think the 331. I don't think there's a bad choice for either one of those. And I don't know if I buy into the 347 wearing sooner or any of that, because I'm never going to have any of these motors that long. Sticks and stones, you have, let's see, I'm 100% disabled combat veteran. Your videos have given me a way out of this crap, a new passion. Hey, you're welcome to be here all the time, man. Hope I come down. Oh, you do glass blowing? Oh, that's cool. Is it a glass turbo? A little better guts, and there's a slight wire harness difference too. Okay. Sticks and stones, I appreciate that. You don't have to give me anything, but what we want is you just come hang out and tell stories and stuff. Talk shop, do car guy stuff, bench race, lie about how fast we were. All that. All that's good. How much boost we ran, how much boost we really ran, how much boost we would have liked to have run. I need to get my Omni, and I want to get the little Metro motor running too. The next one I'm going to do on the Metro is we're going to compare the AMR to the little turbo. I think I can just put my and Freya, you may tell me if I'm wrong here. Can I just take the exhaust off of my 87 Sprint the exhaust manifold and the turbo, and bolted on the Metro engine? Is the exhaust bolt pattern the same? I'm curious. A banner for your website, maybe. Anybody asks, just point. Yeah, there you go. Here, go here, right here. I know every factory service manual I have, the transmission portion is always as thick as the rest of the whole car. Yeah, I would imagine it's a lot. I still kind of want to take apart my 4060 that came out of the truck. I've never taken one apart. I think it would be interesting. What's a 331? That's a stroker 5-liter 302. So it's a 3250 stroke crank and then a 30, I think it's 30 or 40 overbore. So it's a 302 Ford that's been bored and stroked, poked and stroked, as they say. And the nice thing about that is, particularly if you're going with an intake manifold that softens the bottom end up as you add to that. It's nice, the long runner factory 5-liter intake manifolds, they make a, the the short stroke motor into a torque motor. You can't do that. They're high RPM motors. No, they're all dictated by the head scam and intake manifold. If you look at a 305 and you look at a 302 and you look at what they did to the runners on them, they make really similar power curves. Even though the bore and stroke are wildly different. Is a 363 worth it for a couple grand more? The 363s are awesome. I can say nothing but good things about them, particularly if you get a 363 with a dart block, because then it's just bigger. Excuse me. Then it's a 6-liter compared to a 5.3 or I guess a 5.7. So it's better through the whole curve. I love the 363 that I had. That was an easy 1,000 horsepower. It's like 16 or 17 pounds. The money consideration thing is a personal thing. Can you swing that? And will it bring enjoyment to you to be able to say 363 stroker more than a 347 stroker? Either one of them, if you're going to make, like I said, we've talked about this on the LS stuff. If you want to make 1,000 horsepower and you put 1,000 horsepower turbo or 1,000 horsepower twin turbos on it on a 347, you're going to make 1,000 horsepower. You're also going to do it on a 363. You can argue that it's more responsive with the 363 than the 347, which it would be. Is that a benefit to you? Yes, probably being more responsive is a benefit. Does it outweigh the cost? Nobody else really can make that decision. Costly mistake of destroying a perfectly good transmission was installing a shift kit wrong. I'm going to try again with one on my engine stand. I'm positive I must have dropped something before. Yeah, you got to make sure all the magic bits are in the right spot. That the separator plate holes and magic check valves. If you have, some of them have springs too, I think. What's the bare minimum to upgrade a 6-liter to be able to support 1,000 horsepower? You don't need to really do anything to it. You could take it apart and put ring gap in it. And then I like to put head studs on it. You're going to put new head gaskets in it. And then it's ready to do that. Most guys go with a cam and springs. And then you need 1,000 horsepower turbo. But the motor itself just needs ring gap. And a lot of guys run it without putting ring gap in it. But at 1,000 horsepower level, I would definitely recommend it. But we've run lots of 1,000 horsepower stuff with stock internals. And the reliability thing is I don't know what you're doing to it. Like, do you mean reliable? Like, you could certainly go drive it across the country because you're not making 1,000 horsepower while you're driving it across the country. Can you go out and race it in a 24-hour race at 1,000 horsepower? No. It's not going to do that. Winston, you lost one of the BBs? Yeah. Not sure if it's true, but some people say they prefer a 331 since the stroke does not rock on bottom and center versus a 347. I don't know what they mean by rock. What they're worried about is the longer stroke pulling the piston out and that uncovering part of the skirt of the piston. But I don't think that's really a thing. The real concern that the people were talking about, I haven't heard that so much because that's just a piston design thing and a rod length thing. Normally the argument against the 347 is more side load, more angularity, so more thrust on the side so that it wears it out. And then also because of the stroke length and the connecting rod length, that used to necessitate having the pin for the rod and the piston intersect the oil ring hole. And so they didn't like that design. That usually was the argument against it. 1,000 horsepower is a lot for street and daily. Yeah, 1,000 horsepower turbo is easy to drive around. It just depends on how much time you're spending using the 1,000 horsepower versus how much time you're not using it. In any kind of street thing, you're not using it, 99% of the time. Because even at 1,000 horsepower on the street, where can you nail that and have it not just annihilate the tires and go through gears? Like, how often do you get to do that? Lockup turbo 400s are really expensive, meant for pro mods. I went with a way smaller cam because nobody else is paying for the gas. I want a daily, not a show car. Yeah, I would. For turbo stuff, definitely smaller cam. I struggled to find anywhere I can use 600 horsepower. That's the thing. And particularly if you have a really loud car, it draws a lot of attention. Interstate 80 on Illinois. Yeah, even I've driven across the country and on most major highways, even late at night, it's not as deserted as I would want it to be. To like 1,000 horsepower is, like we said, that's somewhere between 200 and 250 miles an hour if you have a car that will do that. And so you can't really do that if you're legging it out all the way. Just doing acceleration runs, you could do that. I guess there's a lot of deserted stuff in Texas, and we've seen it in like the road going out to the Silver State out in Nevada is like that too. There's a lot of empty roads. It's easy to burn up 700 horsepower on the freeway pretty quick. Yeah, you're definitely run out of room. And the safety thing is also a concern. You don't want to be doing anything knuckleheaded with other people out there. But on a road when you're by yourself, hey, you got to make your own decision. You got to, that's up to you. Should I put up banners? 68% saying yes. Yes, indeed. We got one more minute. There. Dennis, what did you have a question mark there? Did you have a question? There's some back roads leading to highways that aren't widely used. You want to do a speed test? Is that what your question is? We have the old Deer Park drag strip. That's nice if you're close enough to a drag strip where you can go do some drag strip stuff. That's cool. Like a kid waiting to get everything back together on Christmas. First turbo, that'll be good. In a previous stream, you suggested 2 ways to get some of my 5-liter with twin GT 3560s. I'm running twin 44s. Okay, see how it does. Thousand horsepower should only be used. My wife is least expecting it. Doesn't make for good videos, right? What's your go-to for 800 horsepower? Is this what motor are you starting with? Four 363s are almost the same price as a 408. And that'd be the other consideration. If you're thinking about spending the money on 363, you could go with a 351. You know what kind of banners you think about putting up? They would be the people that are supporting the channel. It'd be richardholdnerperformance.com, and then the guys from Brian Tooley and the guys from Airflow Research and stuff, just to help take care of those guys. And also, like I said, even more than that, I mean, I mention them all the time, and they're good people, but I just want a different. I look at this all the time, so just something different for back behind there. Oh, what turbo would you pick for 800 horsepower? We're gonna have some stuff here coming up in the next month or so on a 6 liter, but that's 78, 75 VS Racing kind of thing territory. Are you offering space for sale in the banner? Do you want to advertise something? How do I get a notification on the live feeds? I don't know. I'm not in charge of that. The notifications are done by YouTube. So I don't know how they decide who to send it to. I can tell you that when I do a video, I would love it if they would send notifications for my video to the 310 or 20,000 subscribers that I have, but they do not do that. I'm looking into setting my twin charge project for nitromethane. Doesn't seem too difficult. I want it for the crackle. So is your current fuel system big enough for that? Wouldn't even be worried about people or police. I would be worried about wild animals. That's another consideration. Like the guys out they're doing stuff when we're doing the Silver State race. I mean, they close the road off and everything, and that's all good. There's no other people on there. But if you hit a deer or cattle or something, that's not going to be good. I may lots of eyeballs. What do you have, Winston? What do you have, a shop, or what do you do? What time do you do your live feeds? During the day, it's kind of random, but normally 7 o'clock Pacific Standard Time at night is the normal one. Please ban the background. That desktop on the floor drives me crazy. That's an old one. I just need to take the hard drive out of it. You don't want to send it to subscribers unless they join each stream and watch each video that gets it buried. There's some check boxes to not notify subs, and if you do that, you often get new people. We don't want to send notifications to subscribers. I want to send notifications to all the subscribers when I do a normal video, not a live feed. A live feed going to all of the subscribers, I think, would be good. It would help get more people here. I don't know at what point where it would become problematic if there are too many people here, but not yet. It's in infancy. Okay, Winston. Yeah, just let me know. What's your favorite overall turbo, regardless of application? I don't have a favorite one. I would just pick the turbo for what I'm trying to achieve. Turbo or turbos. Going to add a second fuel system. I'm thinking easiest just to have a second system with a cranked up regulator. Okay. Do you have enough injector for it? Do you just have to change the pump and the regulator for it? Do you have enough extra flow capacity with the injector size that you have? People who regularly pop up will get in our recommendations anyway. Okay. I get notification if you ring the bell to all. Ring my bell. Yeah, remember, like, share, subscribe. What's the last one? Ring the bell. Prestige. What's up, dog? What's up, mod dog? It's like Mad Dog, but modular Ford. So I just got who's this from? Let's see is it one of the guys here today? Do you have a set YouTube live schedule? Can't find information anywhere. I must not be doing my job. See a lot of 6-liter Fox body Mustangs here. Okay. Rolling in my 6.0 instead of my 5.0. I've already done with carburetor, so I'm starting there. Okay. Got to check to order parts this morning. Doing a 67 Camaro build. Nice. Sniper 2 with the Pro Dash. Try to send some pictures. Yeah, Turbo Central. Yeah, send me some. I'm sure everybody here wants to see the. It's an M90, right? Is a M90 or a 112? He wants all the fancy wiring tricks. That'll be cool. Prestige, that'll be cool. If I can achieve my target horsepower on pump gas, is there really much benefit to running E85 if I'm not upping my horsepower goal? Well, if you can reach your goal, that's fine. If that's what you're trying to do, and you can reach it on pump gas, that's good. You could reach it at a much lower boost level on E85 because the E85 is good, and you could do it with a safer, wider tuning window on E85. Need to make a badge for those Mustangs where the 6.0 is crossed, the 5.0 is crossed out and it's a 6.0. Yeah. Isn't the no set schedule the whole point of you doing this? It is for, I want to try to make the nightly one a set schedule so people can come and know that it's there all the time. Sometimes it's hard to do. The M112 from a Range Rover, okay, that makes it even cooler than an M90. Because, 112 is bigger. In other news, do you think my stock NPI long lock will be able to hit 500 wheel through a 4R70, which in twin GT35s? Yeah, I don't see why not. Twin GT35s are 1,000 horsepower turbos with 2 of them. So that and 500 wheel horsepower through that transmission, let's say it's 600 or 650 flywheel. That's not hard at all. I saw a video earlier today where someone shopping floor is putting LS3s into the new Miatas, and that's what you need. A monster Miata is a really fun car. The shop charges $75,000. Wow. Are they like emission certified and everything? Is that why they're that much? Because I know that LS swapping a Miata is not that expensive. We're trying to do the LS swap within a few months. We are, because we want to get the motor going in the Mustang so that we can use it to do testing on the chassis dyno. I'm going to put a fully forged long block in later, hence the big turbos. Cool. And I get why that's a lot of money to burn. I'll never come back from. Yeah, that's that. You just have to love the Miata enough with that V8 in it to spend that kind of money, and then have that kind of money to throw at stuff like that. It's so loud that my earplugs are not enough. Yeah, you got to do double stuff. You got to put the earplugs in your ear and then put the headphones on, like if you're going to a range or something. That's crazy. Your project will be done so much quicker than mine out of nowhere. Well, Tim, that Mustang's been sitting for a long time. So if we go back as long as it's been sitting without a motor in it, it's been years and years and years and years and years. I mean, it's been decades, really. I love the retractable hardtops, particularly on the Soul Red cars. Cool. Having my Z06 power in a car that is 500 pounds lighter. Yeah, that would be insane. Miatas are fun cars too. They handle really well. I don't know about with the aluminum motor, and I don't know what the setback is. I don't know what the weight change is, but I can tell you we drove one in the Silver State, which was terrible. We drove it with an iron-headed small block Ford in it that was making like 300 at the tire. It was really fun. It was a 168 mile an hour car. So it was and they had put coilovers or something on. I think they just put coilovers on it so they could say that they had coilovers on it. I don't think there was any rhyme or reason to what they did, but I can tell you the thing wanted to swap ends when you lifted off the throttle. It was not good. But the convertible top was rock solid at 168. New car stuff today, picking up an abandoned 17-year-old cat. Is the cat still alive at 17? That's amazing. Changing water pump on a 4200 Trailblazer. Retractable fastback, I think is a naming. Okay, cool. On that note, it is time to go. So we've got more stuff we could talk about tonight. That'll be awesome. I will see you guys all later. And we're ending, we're ending, we're ending.